Hey guys, this is JSer. How's everything going? In this short video, I'm going to do some reviews of the CSS position. Yeah, let's just begin. As you already know, there are several values for position. Usual ones would be like static, relative, absolute, fixed, and a sticky. I never used sticky before. Let's see what each of them represent. First one, static. This is a default value, so nothing special. So all the elements are laid out in the normal flow. It's just like for that inline box here, just from left to right, from top to bottom. And okay, and if it's set to relative, like the yellow one here, it can support the top and left relative to the original position if it is static. So it's like top 100, it's gonna be here, right? Yeah, so all the elements are not affected. It's kind of like transform, I think. It's kind of a transform. Yeah, transform from here to here. Okay, and this is the absolute. Absolute, the top left will be relative to the first parent, the parent element, which is relative or absolute or fixed, right? We'll come to that later. This is absolute, and see the difference between relative and absolute, and all the other elements are affected if set to absolute, because this element is not on the normal flow of this layout. And this is sticky. Sticky, at first glance, it's the same as static, but if you scroll, it will become fixed when it matches this like here, because we set 20 pixel with 0, it's gonna be here. Yeah, if like 100, 100, that it will be here. So if the position to, I should say, if it's the first parent which has the scroll, right? The distance to the border, if it's larger than the top, then it should be a static, and then it become not static. It should be relative, I think, and then fixed. Yeah, I mean static because actually sticky creates a static context. Let's come to the detail. Okay, there's some concept here. A positional element is an element whose position is not static. So all the values that is not default. Cool. So static, the element is positioned according to the normal flow of the document. The top right Z index is ignored. Yeah. And then relative. Relative, yeah, it's the coordinate, the position, top right, bottom left are effective, and the offset does not affect the position of any element. The space given for the element is page layout is the same as if the position were static. Yeah, and pay attention that these relative creates a new stacking context when Z value is not auto. Yeah, and relative, absolute. Okay, for absolute, it's similar to relative, except that the element is put out from the normal document. There's no space left for it. It's positioned relative to its closest position ancestor, like here. The closest will be the body, so it will be relative to the body's offset. Yeah, and this also creates a new stacking context when Z index is not auto. And the fixed is relative to the viewport, which means the window. You can think of that. Cool. Yeah, it still creates a new stacking window, stacking context, and there's no Z-index thing. It always have a stacking context because it's already it's kind of put up the document flow. And the sticky is nearest scrolling ancestor. Yeah, the first parent which has the scroll and containing block, including the table reader, blah blah blah. Okay, it has always create a new stacking context. Yeah. So I think nothing special. The only thing we need to care is about two things. One is sticky. I never used sticky before. The only use case I can think of is creating this kind of effect in the contact list. Let's try. Yeah, here is it. So it will be relative to the first scrolling elements. If we say it the DL here to like margin 100 pixel, and yeah. Now wait a minute. Hide 200 pixel overflow auto. Margin height overflow. Yeah, this is the container. So you see it's relative to this area of the first scrollable element. The top set to the legend is here, -1 pixel. So if you set it to 0, it will be perfect, right? Yeah. Like 10 if something have margin. See the space here? This -10, it's gonna be, yeah, chopped up. Cool. So I think for 0 pixel is the best. Okay, this is cool, but I don't think not all browsers supports it. Now let's go back to the stacking context. We see that. Okay, wait. One thing is about the position here. For absolute value, the position is said it is positioned to relative to its closest position ancestor. So for position ancestor, it means all the ancestor that doesn't have the default position, which is static. So relative can do that, absolute can do that, fixed can do that, sticky can do that. So if you put absolute, it will be relative to all this kind of positioned parent. In your case, for my case, I usually add a relative. Yeah, I want to add an absolute child. So about the stacking context, several years ago, I made a case that I add a loading spinner. But when the page got longer and longer, say I set auto pager here, and the page got very long, and the loading spinner, when it is spinning, and my app just crashes because I didn't know the reason at the beginning, and I did and found that it's related to the page height. The page is too long, and when the loading spinner is spinning, actually the loading spinner and the page is in the same stacking context. We didn't add anything. We just used the relative position for the spinner, and we didn't add a Z index. And you know what? After I test on the submitted on Mac, I found that actually the browser is thinking the whole page as the rotating target. Yeah, you want to do the calculation there. So when the spinner, even though the spinner is very small, the whole page got affected, and so the browser says, oh, it cost me too much memory to handle it. I cannot spin it anymore, so it crashes to web view. The solution I found is that I add a z-index to that spinner to took it out from the page layer. So when I add the CSS animation to spin it, it only affects a small area. So actually, it's kind of very important, this concept. Not only for some weird layout, but also for performance issues. Cool. So what is stacking context? I think this graph just makes things very clear. We use z-index to control which should be displayed above the other elements. Like this is a div, its position is relative and has z-index as 5. This is 2, and this 5 should be how to say, covering these 2, right? Although they are not overlapping, so it doesn't matter. Now we have this div 3. It has position absolute, and z-index says to 4. So this 4 is covering this 2, but it's got covered by this 5. Right. This is okay. But what if there is another div in this div 3, and it has z-index 6? This is in this 6. You might thought that it is bigger than 5, so you must be covering this div 1, but actually not, because this position absolute create a stacking context, so all the things within this div will be treated as the same z-index, comparing to other elements, like siblings of div 3. So no matter what you set, like z-index 6, like z-index 1, smaller than it or not, the 3 to div 1 and div 2, all of these elements have the z-index 4, right? And within this element, this z-index matters. Maybe matters. Yeah. And so we're considering the relationship here. We should just think about the div 3 as the root. It's in DOM, in browsers, everything is a tree. So this is also a tree, I think. So there's a stacking context tree. This is a root stacking context, and then here is another stacking context. Of course, there's a stacking context, but no child is there. Context. So it's all about the trees. Okay, so this is stacking context, but there's just some interesting fact. So a stacking context is a three-dimensional conceptualization of HTML elements along imaginary z-axis relative to user, who is assumed to be facing the viewport. A stacking context is formed anywhere in the document by any element in the following scenarios. Well, the root element, the default stacking context, the elements with a position value absolute or relative, and z-index. If z-index is not set, you want to be put at the default context, and leads to the problem I said before, right? The spinner just affects the whole page. And elements with a position value fixed or sticky, no matter you set the z-index or not, it's gonna be creating a stacking context. Cool. And element that is a child of flags means flags item, z-index. Element that is child of a grid. Oh, I haven't dug into the grid enough. And here's the thing. Element with the opacity value less than 1. Why opacity affects the stacking context? Well, this is I think this related to the rendering process. Like I said, if we set the div 3 here has a different opacity, like 0, comparing to the other area, it should be treated especially, right? So what if we have a CSS transition to that, like the opacity from 0 to 1 and 1 to 0? if there is no stacking context, when browser renders it, it will re-render the whole page, right? Because there's no they're on the same layer, like same level of canvas, and only this area changes its opacity. Yeah, so browser will have a hard time to render them. So this is why I believe that this is why this opacity, this area with different opacity has stacking context. So now browser knows, okay, I can just repaint this part of the area when the opacity change. So yeah, that's I think it's for performance reason. I think so. Opacity values less than 1, it will have stacking context. Cool. Now element with a mixed blend load. I never used it before. It should be CSS something. Cool. So that's also should be messing up with the rendering process. It's reasonable. And element with any of the following properties with value other than none, like transform. Well, sure, transform is already okay. So to be general rule of thumb, everything treated special, right, in the render process should have a stacking context. Well, if you transform, okay, it's kind of special. I need to handle you on in another how to say, in another fashion, in another way. So give you a stacking context. Transform, filter, perspective, clip path, mask. Seldom used this before. And isolation, you never use it. And element with a webpack overflow scrolling with touch. This created this I think is only working on iOS, I think. So it's creating a, while it's a scrollable area, it should have a stacking context. Element with a will change, specify any property that could create a stacking context of non-initial value. Well, will change. Let's see what is will change. Element with a contain, value of the layout. Wow, this is a new thing. Okay, so in summary, stacking context can be contained in other stacking context and together create a hierarchy tree, right? Each stacking context is completely independent of its sibling, right? Yeah. Each stacking context is self-contained. Stack. Yeah. Let's see what this will change is. The will change this property hints to browsers how an element is expected to change. Well, as we see, if you said the will change the position, anything, the browsers will say, okay, I'll see, I see, and then I will take extra care for that area only. So stacking context, cool, reasonable. Contain. The contains property allows the author to indicate that the element and its contents are, as much as possible, independent from the rest of the document tree. Well, this I don't know what this is. Sounds like looks complicated. These allow the browsers to recalculate the layout, style, paint, or any combination of them for a limited area of the DOM and not to the entire page. Yeah, this is for performance benefits. Cool. Let's try to use it later. And you see, this allows the browsers to recalculate it, blah, 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 to that specific limited area. Well, limited area, and then yeah, it's stacking context. Cool. So that's all for all the position. Hope it helps. See you next time. Bye bye.